My mother stared into my eyes and threw scalding soup in my face, demanding I surrender my car and credit card to her stepdaughter, Vera, or leave forever. I'm Nora, and I chose to walk away from the Denver home I helped build, the family dinners I cooked, and the silence I mistook for peace. When they returned, the house was empty, save for a man in a suit waiting inside. This story will make you question how far you'd go before saying, enough. The mornings tell the mood of a house, that if you wake up tense, it's because something's already wrong. That Friday, I opened my eyes before the sun had fully claimed the kitchen. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. I padded downstairs in my socks, the old wood cool beneath my heels. The house still smelled faintly of lavender oil and last night's sage bread. I had scrubbed the counters twice, not for hygiene, just to keep myself moving. I cracked the window, let in a sliver of suburban Denver's morning chill, and started the kettle. I didn't touch the coffee machine. That was always Martha's territory. As the toast popped, I reminded myself Vera was coming again, my mother's stepdaughter. My father had passed before she arrived. She wasn't blood, but you'd never know that from how Martha treated her. The praise, the babying, the our girl tone in her voice. I'd tried not to let it get to me, but the past few weeks it had become unbearable. Still, I buttered toast, made oatmeal, warmed leftover soup from the night before, Martha's favorite. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just avoid another eruption. Martha came down around 8:00, housecoat dragging, eyes sharp behind her glasses. She didn't say good morning, just sat, spooned oatmeal into her bowl and sipped loudly. I waited. The pause was too long. She was working herself up. Finally, she looked at me. Her voice was sweet, but the kind of sweet you only hear right before poison hits your gut. Vera's stopping by around 9:00. She's having such a hard time lately, Martha said, as if I didn't know. I nodded once. Neutral, non-committal, she continued, tone dipping into business. She'll need your car today and your card just until she gets settled with work. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. I'm sorry? You don't use the car during the week. You work freelance consulting now. Mr. Card, it's time you did something useful. She's family too, you know. I swallowed. Not the oatmeal. My anger. No, I said gently. I'm not giving her my car or my card. I've helped enough. Martha's eyes narrowed like I'd just spat in her cereal. You think you're better than her with your consulting job and fancy notebook? This is about family. She's trying. You're hoarding. I kept my voice level. I'm not hoarding. I'm surviving. And I've given this family more than you remember. She stood. She'll be here soon, she snapped. Give her all your things or get out. And just like that, I knew this wasn't a conversation. It was a command. I didn't respond, just turned off the stove. Then came the sound of the soup pot scraping against the burner. I turned. Too late. The soup, still hot, arced through the air like a scalding wave. It hit my cheek, soaked my blouse, burned into my shoulder. But what stung more wasn't the heat. It was the clarity. She threw soup at me. Her daughter wasn't even here yet, and Martha had chosen her violently. I didn't scream, didn't flinch. I simply stood there, soup dripping from my collar. I stared at the woman who had given birth to me, who now glared like I was trespassing in a house I helped pay off. I remembered when the deed changed hands last month. Martha said she was simplifying the paperwork. I hadn't argued. I thought stupidly that peace was worth the cost. Apparently, peace meant surrender. I walked upstairs, slowly. Wet, silent. In my room, I took the small bag I used for overnights, packed only what was mine, truly mine. A pair of jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. There, tucked under old birthday cards, was the cloth napkin my father embroidered when I turned 16. I see you. His handwriting, his stitching. I folded it carefully, placed it at the very top. No yelling, no note, no farewell. Downstairs, I heard the garage door creak open, Vera's SUV timing poetic and cruel. I didn't wait to see her. I didn't want to hear her, "Oh no, what happened here?" in that false, sugary voice. I walked past the kitchen. Martha didn't follow. Maybe she thought I'd return. Maybe she thought shame would pull me back like it always had. I reached the front door. Soup clung to my blouse, but my back was straight. I held my car key tight and walked to the curb. The wind had picked up. It felt clean. I opened the door, sat, turned the key, and I didn't look back. I didn't call anyone. I just kept driving around corners I didn't recognize. Past intersections I normally rolled through without thought, but today none of it felt familiar. The silence in the car was thick. Even the engine sounded like it was holding its breath. My hand stayed at 10 and 2, like some first-time driver on her test. I wasn't sure if it was the soup drying on my chest, or the words echoing louder now than when she'd first spoken them. No trembling, no tears, just a steady emptiness settling somewhere deep in my stomach. I didn't know where I was headed. I just knew I couldn't go back. An hour later, I pulled into a small cafe on the edge of a strip mall, one of those places that serves burnt coffee but has free Wi-Fi and nobody bothers you if you sit too long. I didn't go in. I sat in my car, engine off, watching the reflection of myself in the rearview mirror. The soup stain had turned stiff, dried against my collarbone. My face was still blotchy. Not from crying, just from heat and disbelief. How did I become the outsider in my own life? The last time I felt like this, I'd been standing in the back aisle of our family's grocery store just 3 weeks ago. It was a Wednesday. I was restocking shelves in the canned goods section when I heard the jingle of heels and exaggerated laughter coming down the main aisle. Vera, her voice always carried like it belonged to someone used to being overheard. She wore a blouse too white for a grocery store and heels too high for walking, let alone managing. Martha followed behind her with the pride of a mother escorting her daughter to prom. "Everyone, meet our new store manager, Vera Jensen," Martha announced like we were at a press conference, not next to a discount bin of lentils. No one looked at me, not even Vera. Not really. She just smiled, that practiced, tight-lipped grin of hers, then walked right into the back office like she'd been working there for years. I waited. I waited for Martha to look at me, to say something. Anything. Instead, she patted my shoulder and whispered, "Take some time off, sweetie. You've been running yourself thin. Let Vera handle things now." I wasn't fired. I wasn't demoted. I was erased. Back in the car, I pulled my phone from the console and opened the family Facebook group. New notification, Sense and Legacy. Women of Strength album uploaded by Martha. I clicked. Photo after photo. Vera smiling. Vera organizing. Vera leading morning staff meetings in the break room I used to unlock every day at 5:30 a.m. There was a photo of the Halloween display I had designed last month. Cornucopia, twinkle lights, seasonal color palette, the whole thing. Caption read, "Bearer's first fall installation, brilliant work." I stared at it so long I forgot to breathe. My thumb trembled as I scrolled further. Then I stopped. One photo caught my eye. A family dinner. Our dining room table, my serving bowls, the menu I had prepared down to the wine pairing. And the caption, "Beautiful evening hosted by Vera for the whole family. Her warmth brings us together." It felt like someone had dug their hand inside my chest and rearranged the truth. I wasn't even in the frame, and yet it was my food, my candles, my home. I set the phone down. The screen stayed lit for a second longer before fading to black. I didn't even know where I was driving until the old sign came into view. Jensen Market since 1975. My father opened that store with one freezer and a dream. After his stroke, I turned it around, rebranded it, grew it, made it matter again. Now, stretched across the front windows was a new banner founded by Martha and Vera Jensen. I parked across the lot. Didn't get out. Inside, I could see a teenage cashier folding paper bags. A few regulars strolled the aisles. I knew every shelf in that place, every creak in the floorboards, every staff birthday. My father once told me, not long before he passed, "Keep the ledger. Someday it'll matter more than you think." I kept it, the original paper ledger, tucked away in a storage box under my bed. His handwriting. Every early sale, every inventory slip, every check signed by him. Long before Vera even entered our lives. And now his name wasn't even on the front window. That night, after circling a few more blocks to clear my head, I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there for a long time before I sent the message to Sophie, my old coworker, the only one who'd ever said what I never dared say aloud. I think it's time. She responded almost instantly. Nora, I always knew they were pushing you out. I saved something for you. Come by. That was all she wrote, but it was more than enough. I typed her address into the GPS. She lived maybe 10 minutes away. I turned the ignition, pulled out onto the road, and let the soft glow of the street lamps guide me toward something that finally resembled direction. As I stopped at a red light, something shifted in the trunk behind me. I didn't have much with me, just that one box. But I heard the corner of something slide. In the rearview mirror, I caught the edge of it peeking out the napkin. I see you, it whispered again. I smiled, not with joy, but with clarity. Let's see how much history they've rewritten, I murmured. Sophie didn't say anything at first. She just stood in the doorway, eyes filled with something heavier than sympathy. She held out a manila envelope. I didn't know who else to trust with this, she said. I've had it for a while. I stepped inside slowly, my legs stiff from the long drive and my thoughts more tangled than ever. Her home smelled like lavender oil and cedar, clean and grounded. I hadn't realized how much I missed that feeling. I opened the envelope, right there in her foyer. Inside was a copy of a document I'd never seen before. It looked official, notarized. My name was printed at the bottom, followed by what was supposed to be my signature. Asset Consolidation Transfer Agreement, the title read. According to this paper, I had signed over my stake in the grocery store to Martha, at a date just 2 weeks before Vera strolled in with her clipboard and fake smile. That's not my signature, I whispered. My voice sounded too small for the walls around us. Sophie nodded. I figured. I watched Vera hand it to Martha. Some notary guy was there too, but he barely looked up. Didn't ask for ID, didn't check anything, just stamped and walked. I felt the heat start in my chest. I wasn't just erased. I was erased on paper with fake ink and official stamps, legally invisible, conveniently removed. Then Sophie put a hand on my arm. I still have the key to your storage unit, she said. I kept it just in case. Thought maybe one day you'd need it. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. We left 5 minutes later. The drive was quiet except for the wind outside and the rattling inside my chest. The unit was exactly as I'd left it, a low-cost rental in the industrial side of town. Steel door, dusty keypad, and that strange metallic scent that always reminded me of garage sales and forgotten history. Sophie unlocked it while I held my breath. Inside were the remnants of my past life, old holiday decorations, childhood keepsakes, boxes of paper I never had time to sort, and near the back, under a tarp, was the crate I'd packed on Park Nudity. We pulled it out together. There it was, the original ledger, leather-bound, worn from use. Inside, years of my handwriting, purchase orders, tax filings, staff payment logs, signed by me. All of them. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the crate, half tucked between 2 old recipe binders, was a torn envelope. My name was scrawled in my father's handwriting. The flap was already open. I pulled out the letter slowly, careful not to tear the fragile paper. It was dated 1 month before his stroke. The ink had faded a little, but the message was clear. If anything ever feels wrong, go to Mr. Brooks. He helped me protect what matters most. I left instructions. He knows where everything is. Trust him, Nora. I pressed the letter to my chest, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with clarity. He knew. He'd known they'd come for it, that they'd come for me, and he'd left a trail in case I ever had to fight. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't being dramatic like they always claimed. Sophie stood nearby, wiping her eyes. We didn't say much after that, just packed the ledger, the letter, and the envelope into a cloth bag and drove straight to downtown, where Brooks still practiced law out of a modest brick office sandwiched between a dental clinic and a notary service. That irony wasn't lost on me. We walked in together, but I asked to speak to him alone. He looked to be in his 60s now, silver hair still sharpied with a firm handshake that made me feel steadier than I had in weeks. You're Nora, he said, not even asking. I was wondering when you'd come. He pulled a locked drawer open behind his desk. took out a thin black folder with my father's initials embossed in gold. Inside were copies of the store's original ownership documents. Before Martha had ever touched a single can of beans, before Vera ever learned to pronounce inventory. Then he flipped the page. It was a notarized letter from my father dated years ago. My daughter, Nora, retains majority control of Jensen Market. If ownership is ever disputed, refer to the primary ledger in her hand. Her signature alone carries final say. I didn't blink. Mr. Brooks leaned back in his chair and studied me. You ready to assert your legal rights? He asked calmly, like he'd been waiting years to say those words. I took a long breath, let it settle in my lungs. Then I looked down at the napkin I'd tucked into my coat pocket, its edges worn soft. I folded it slowly, deliberately, and looked him straight in the eyes. Yes, I said, but I'm not just coming for the store. He tilted his head, curious. Oh? I'm coming for every single piece they tried to steal, and every lie they fed people to cover it. He smiled, then, not out of amusement, but recognition. Like he'd seen this moment bloom in other women before. He tapped the folder with a pen. Good, because the person who forged this, he held up the fraudulent transfer agreement, is about to regret putting ink to paper. I nodded once. Let's begin. While Mr. Brooks dialed his first call, I sat in the corner of his office, scrolling through my phone's contacts with a strange, unfamiliar calm. There was only one name I knew I had to tap. I hadn't spoken to her since she graduated 3 years ago, but I remembered her quiet, nervous smile and the way she'd always hesitated before hitting send on emails Vera dictated to her. Clara, I sent a simple message. Hi, it's Nora. Something's come up. Can we talk? She replied before I could even put the phone down. Yes, I thought this day might come. 2 mornings later, I pulled into the Denver Public Library parking lot just after 8 o'clock. I needed to print and organize every piece of documentation Mr. Brooks requested before our next step. I wasn't just building a case, I was preparing to take back the truth. The printer room was quiet. I logged into my old email, navigating to a folder I hadn't opened in nearly a year. My resume files. I'd updated it regularly when I still hoped to apply for community development boards or maybe consult for another retail chain. I downloaded the last version, hit print, and waited for the humming sound of the machine. But something caught my eye. An attachment in a public county filing that had popped up in a Google alert a week ago. I hadn't checked it until now. I clicked. My stomach twisted. It was my resume, same layout, same bullet points. Even the phrasing I used when describing the outreach program I'd built after Dad's stroke. Only the name at the top wasn't mine, it was Vera's. They'd submitted it in a public funding proposal for a state grant, claiming she had founded and run Jensen Market's community initiatives. I stood motionless, my hand still resting on the printer lid. This wasn't just stealing credit. This was state fraud with my name scrubbed clean like I'd never been there. Never existed. I didn't move until the librarian walked by and cleared her throat softly, reminding me where I was. The printed resume slid out. I folded it carefully, slid it into a folder, and walked back to my car like I was moving underwater. By noon, I was sitting across from Clara at a small cafe in Cherry Creek. She looked older, more confident than I remembered, but her eyes still held that hesitant edge, like she'd been waiting for someone to say, "It's okay to tell the truth." "I saved some of the emails," she said after our drinks arrived. "I didn't mean to spy. Vera always made me feel like I was doing something wrong, even when I was just typing what she told me." I nodded slowly. "You don't have to explain, Clara. I know what that pressure feels like." She slid her phone across the table. Screenshots, dozens, emails labeled draft from Nora, delete after, and rewrite were my name, even attachments I remembered composing with my style of freezing and internal notes. "You knew they were using these?" I asked. I thought maybe it was approved. Martha was always talking about how we need to clean up Nora's legacy and make the store future-facing. I leaned back. Legacy? They were turning me into a ghost, one they could plagiarize freely and then bury. "Would you be willing to forward these?" I asked. Clara nodded without hesitation. "I already have." Later that afternoon, after I dropped Clara off and thanked her quietly, I pulled into the parking lot behind Brooks' office. From the front, the building looked like any other aging legal suite. Quiet brick, curtained windows, a sign that had faded from too many summers. But inside, change was moving. I handed him the screenshots and Vera's resume filing. He read through them, pausing only to raise an eyebrow. "This is damning," he muttered. "We needed one more trigger." "This is it." We moved into the private conference room in the back. He'd scheduled a sit-down with a retired judge, neutral, well-respected, and still licensed to mediate disputes. His presence was meant to send a message. We're not just upset. We're organized. The mediator's voice was calm and measured as he reviewed the evidence. I sat silently through it all, letting the swirl of facts and forged documents speak for me. No crying, no raised voice, only the weight of proof and the absence of my name in places it should have been. As the meeting ended, Mr. Brooks began drafting a formal packet. Not a lawsuit, not yet, but a detailed summary of everything we had set to be sent to Martha and Vera's shared address. The tone was professional, the intent was crystal clear. "You have 24 hours to respond before we escalate this to court," it read. I added something of my own. A yellow post-it note, square and neat on top of the folder. "For your records and your conscience that evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the sky dulled to lavender, I sat on the edge of my motel bed, waiting." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. "You don't want to do this. You know how this family handles disobedience." I stared at it, then deleted it without replying. They were still using the same language, disobedience, as if I'd ever signed up for their hierarchy, as if protecting was mine made me a traitor. I powered the phone off and reached for the napkin folded neatly beside my bag. But the next message, the one they didn't expect, it was already written, drafted, scheduled, sent not just to Vera but to the very funding board they'd filed the resume with. Because when you threaten someone who's already walked through fire, they don't flinch. They get strategic. By the time I stepped out of Mr. Brooks' office, the sun had begun to dip behind the Denver skyline. I didn't go home. I didn't even head back to the motel. I just drove until the highway lights blurred into the kind of silence only someone betrayed could sit with comfortably. Then, late Monday afternoon, Martha called. Her voice was as syrupy as it was sharp. "We're having dinner Thursday, just the family. I think it's time we talked this through before you embarrass yourself any further." There it was again, that need to control the narrative. Even now, after everything I'd uncovered, she spoke like I was the one making a mess. I didn't respond right away. When I told Mr. Brooks, he gave me a look that didn't need words. I beat him to it. "I'm going." He didn't argue, just leaned back in his chair and said, "Then go prepared. Let them show you who they are one more time." I chose my clothes carefully that night. Nothing flashy. Just a dark gray dress and the old wristwatch my father gave me the Christmas before his stroke. The leather band was worn and cracked, but the second hand still ticked, quiet, defiant, just like I planned to be. The restaurant was one of those polished places in Boulder, with chandeliers and linen napkins that tried too hard. The kind of place Martha only booked when she wanted to prove something to outsiders or shame someone within. When I arrived, the hostess paused, checked the reservation, and gestured vaguely to the back. "Your party's already seated," she said. "You'll be over this way." We weaved past elegant couples and glowing wine glasses until we reached the last table near the hallway to the restrooms. Not a single centerpiece, not even a breadbasket. And there she was, Vera, seated at the head, right in the spot I used to take at every family occasion, laughing, wearing that silver-wrapped dress Martha always claimed was too flashy for family settings. Unless, of course, Vera wore it. I stood for half a second too long. A waiter hovered awkwardly. I cleared my throat and asked, "Is there another seat available? Perhaps closer to the center?" Before he could respond, Martha turned her head just slightly and snapped, "Don't be difficult, Nora. It's just a seat. Just a seat." Like it wasn't the physical symbol of every choice she'd made to replace me. I smiled, not warmly. I sat. The evening unfolded in slow motion, small talk, forced laughter, Vera monopolizing the conversation while Martha nodded in approval like a stage mother finally seeing her understudies shine. Then came the toast. Vera stood up, raised her glass, a soft white wine that matched her lipstick, and said with a dramatic exhale, "I just want to thank Mom for everything she's done to support me, especially with the car." A round of polite applause broke out. Martha dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin and added, "Some people in this family rise to the occasion. Some fall apart. But not you, Vera." I didn't need to check to know every pair of eyes was looking at me. But I did need to check something else. I slid my phone just slightly under the tablecloth, opened the DMV portal, and typed in the plate number she'd just mentioned. It was mine, the same car I'd left behind when I walked out. According to the records, the title had been transferred 2 days after I left, listed as a gift, my signature forged again. The breath didn't leave me in a gasp. It left in a quiet, steady exhale. I'd stopped expecting shame from any of them. As dessert menus arrived, Martha clinked her glass once more. "Some people make this family proud," she said loudly. "Others, they're content to let resentment sour every room they enter." I rose before she could go further. I didn't knock over my chair. Instead, I turned to the waiter, who had been kind enough to refill my water 3 times without a single snide glance, and said, "Thank you. You've been the most respectful person at this table." He blinked, surprised, and nodded. Then I turned to Martha. "That was your last attempt," I said calmly. "The next thing you receive from me will be notarized." From my purse, I pulled a folded photograph, a black and white copy of the ledger page my father had handwritten years ago, his neat cursive, my name clearly printed in the ownership column, Vera scribbled over in a different pen, an addition made much later. I placed it on the table between them and straightened my shoulders. This isn't about resentment, it's about reality. I didn't wait for their reaction. I turned to walk. Just as I reached the doorway, Vera hissed behind me, "You've always been jealous of me." I stopped, took a single step back, turned halfway, just enough to meet her eye. "Oh," I said softly. "I just finally stopped protecting you from yourself." Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. The stars were sharp and quiet. The valet jogged over with a confused look, holding 2 sets of keys. "This one's yours," he said, handing me the familiar key fob I hadn't seen since the day I left. "But the system registered a backup name matches. There's a legal update on file, said to give you both." I took them both, tucked them into my purse, and didn't say a word. That Thursday night, as the valet handed me those keys outside the restaurant, I didn't drive off right away. I sat there in the driver's seat with the door still ajar, letting the Colorado night air settle on my skin, the scent of sage from the landscaping mixed with the faint perfume still clinging to my collar. Inside, they were still clinking glasses, toasting to Vera, to lies, to everything they thought they'd gotten away with. But I wasn't that quiet girl anymore. The one who always nodded, who always picked up the check, who always gave and never asked. Friday morning came too early. I was standing in line at a local cafe when my debit card declined. I laughed quietly and tried it again. Declined. I pulled out my backup. Same result. By the time I got to my car, my phone lit up with 3 alerts from the bank. Fraud claim initiated, account frozen. Pending investigation. The shared account, my main account, was locked. I didn't need to guess who was behind it, but I called the bank anyway. The voice on the other end was courteous but firm. "Yes, ma'am. We've received a fraud report filed by Martha Jensen. She claimed unauthorized use of joint funds. She's the co-signer, I was the primary." "That money is mine," I said evenly. "Well, until the review is complete, the funds will remain restricted." Restricted? As if I were the one who had lied. I ended the call and stared at the dashboard. My fingers were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel, my knuckles burned white. 5 minutes later, I was in Mr. Brooks' office, standing just inside the threshold, holding the printed alerts in one hand. "They froze my money," I said, voice low. He didn't ask for details. He just pointed to the seat across from him and reached for his legal pad. "They're trying to suffocate you," he muttered, scanning the documents. "They won't," I said. "I'll learn to breathe elsewhere." By the time I left his office, he'd filed an emergency financial injunction and had his assistant draft a formal rebuttal with supporting ownership records. But the day wasn't done with me yet. Around lunchtime, as I was walking back to my car after dropping documents at the bank, Sophie called. I picked up immediately. "Nora, I'm so sorry," she said. "The police came by Mom's house this morning." I stopped mid-step. "What?" They said Martha filed a report, claimed you broke in, that you stole things, and that you threatened Vera. I felt my pulse in my throat. Before I could respond, another call buzzed through, this time from an unknown number. I switched over. "Hello, Miss Jensen," a man said professionally. "This is Officer Lane with the Denver Police Department. We'd appreciate it if you came in voluntarily to discuss a report filed by Martha Jensen. You are not under arrest. We just have some questions." I blinked into the sunlight. "What time?" "Today, if possible." Hung up, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel again. It was becoming familiar, this stillness, right before the next punch. By 1:00 p.m., I was seated in a bland precinct interview room. Beige walls, a scuffed table, 2 metal chairs. Mr. Brooks was beside me, expression unreadable. A young officer entered with a folder and sat across from us. He looked tired, or maybe just bored. He started with pleasantries, then shifted to vague phrasing. "There's been an allegation of property interference, suggestions of aggressive behavior." Mr. Brooks reached calmly into his briefcase and slid a thick folder across the table. "These are digital timestamps, email trails, financial ledgers, and security footage showing Nora Jensen has not stepped foot in her mother's residence since the evening of March 10th. Further, here are notarized documents indicating she was unlawfully removed from joint business ownership and that her personal vehicle was transferred via forged authorization." The officer flipped through the first few pages, his changed. We'll be reviewing this thoroughly," he mumbled. "I'm sure you will," Mr. Brooks said evenly. "And I assume any malicious filing of a false report will also be reviewed thoroughly." No one said much after that. By the time we stepped out into the hallway, dusk had started to stretch across the sky. The elevator pinged, and out walked Vera. Right behind her, Martha. She froze when she saw us. I didn't. Our eyes locked. "You wanted me erased," I said, my voice as calm as the air between us. "Now I've become indelible." Vera's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret dragging this family through the mud." Mr. Brooks didn't flinch. "You should have thought of that before forging 3 signatures. Or maybe that slipped your mind while shopping for a new BMW." Neither of them spoke. But I saw it then, the first flicker of doubt in Martha's eyes. That night, I sat in my rented apartment, a modest 2-bedroom walk-up with creaky floors and fading blinds, and stared at the ceiling. My phone pinged once. It was a message from the bank. Fraud claim invalidated. Access restored, funds available. I scrolled down. There was an attachment. A screenshot of the DMV system showing Vera's gifted car was now flagged as under legal review. I stared at it for a long time, then whispered into the dark, "We're not done." After everything, after the frozen accounts, the false report, the car title theft, you'd think I'd have gotten used to the quiet before another storm. But the message that came that Tuesday was different. It was slipped under my apartment door in an unmarked envelope. No return address, no signature, just a typed note on plain printer paper. "You might want to show up at tonight's HOA meeting, 5:30 p.m., Room Boulder, Civic Hall." There was no threat in it, no warmth either. Just information, pointed, deliberate, and whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. By 5:00, I was parked in front of the Civic Hall, the sky painted in streaks of pink and amber. The air had that early spring coolness that settles deep in your collarbones. I didn't rush. I didn't rehearse. I didn't even button my coat. I just walked in, quiet and unnoticed, and took the last seat in the back corner of Room B. Up front, Vera was already mid-presentation, standing under a bright projector light like she owned the air in that room. She wore a pale blue blazer, hair pinned perfectly. She was speaking to about 24 residents, her voice chipper, sliding between phrases like neighborhood pride and community recipe. Behind her on the screen was a PowerPoint slide titled Beautification Fund Proposed Sponsors and Partners. One bullet point stood out in bold: Jensen Heritage Market, primary donor and founding business partner. I watched the room shift slightly. Some heads nodded, a few older neighbors I recognized from childhood were listening intently. When Vera asked if there were any questions, I raised my hand. Slowly, the room turned. Vera froze mid-blink. "Yes," she said, voice tight. I stood up without smiling. "Could you clarify for the group when exactly you joined the Jensen family business? Because I happen to have tax filings from 2016 to 2021, naming me as the sole contributor and manager. Gasps aren't common in community meetings, but that night I heard one. Vera stammered. She's bitter because she walked away. I walked to the front, calm as rain. I placed a single manila folder on the table next to the microphone and said, "These are publicly filed records. Anyone who wants to verify is welcome to." Then I left. No explanation, no defense. Because sometimes the loudest statement is silence backed by evidence. That night, I logged into my old Facebook account, the one I hadn't used since my father's funeral. My profile photo was still from 10 years ago. I updated nothing. I just posted one image, a scanned portion of my father's handwritten will. The caption beneath it read, "Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you build." It was up for less than 30 minutes before the first 100 comments rolled in. Old employees, former customers, childhood neighbors, people who remembered me at the register, who remembered the remodel after the fire, who remembered me before Vera even stepped foot inside that store. By midnight, screenshots had started circulating. Someone found Vera's social media reel from the week before, claiming she was the co-founder and youngest expansion manager in our family's legacy. They placed it side by side with archived footage from a 2018 news clip. Me, ribbon-cutting the grocery store's remodel in my apron. And like that, her story began to crumble. By sunrise Wednesday, 2 local sponsors had pulled their logos from her Instagram bio. The neighborhood Facebook group had removed her from admin status, and her upcoming talk at the local women's entrepreneur breakfast? I didn't gloat. I didn't even log back in. I poured myself a cup of coffee, stared out the window at the quiet street, and let it all settle in until the phone rang. It was Martha. I didn't answer. She left a voice anyway. "You've made your point. Enough already. Come to the house alone." I pressed delete. 30 minutes later, a text came from Vera. "If you think this makes you look strong, you're delusional." I stared at it for a second, then typed slowly, "I'm not trying to look strong. I just stopped playing weak." I hit send. The rest of the day was quiet until early evening when Mr. Brooks called. "They've requested a private negotiation," he said. "No lawyers on their side, just the 2 of them." "I think they're scared, Nora." I stood by my window, my reflection overlaid against the dusk outside. "Good," I said. I tapped the glass gently with my fingernail. "Let's make them sign." The following Tuesday, I stood in front of a frosted glass door that read Brooks and Carter LLP Mediation Suite. The hallway smelled of sandalwood and money. I wore a black blouse, no makeup, my father's old watch ticking on my wrist like a drum I didn't need to beat. My heels didn't clack. They landed. Inside the room, Martha and Vera sat flanked by a young man in an ill-fitting suit, flipping nervously through a yellow legal pad. He barely looked old enough to rent a car, much less negotiate against a woman who had rebuilt a business from cinder block and canned beans. Mr. Brooks was already standing. He didn't speak, just gave a slight nod like he'd been waiting for me to arrive, like a conductor signaling the final act. "Thank you all for being here," the mediator began, voice flat. "This is a confidential settlement session. All parties have agreed to keep discussions private unless stated otherwise. Let's begin." Vera's attorney launched in, reading from a typed proposal like it was some grand concession. A modest profit-sharing agreement contingent on immediate cessation of Nora's public statements, including social media posts and future claims to ownership. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no apology, non-disparagement clause required. Martha leaned back in her chair like she'd just extended a favor to a beggar. Her eyes dared me to speak, but I didn't. Instead, I opened the slim leather folder I'd brought and slid it across the table toward the mediator. He passed it to their side without a word. Inside, a set of notarized documents, amendments to my father's will. Vera's hand paused midair as she reached for a water bottle. Her smile faltered. The attorney cleared his throat. "We weren't aware there were updated terms." Mr. Brooks leaned forward, smooth and calm. "It appears the original will was amended 3 months before Mr. Jensen's stroke. This version includes a clause granting exclusive rights of ownership, branding, and derivative property of Jensen Market and its affiliates to his daughter Nora, provided she remained active in the business." Then he flipped the page. "These filings," he continued, "show consistent tax returns, supplier contracts, and employee payroll, all under Nora's name. Meanwhile, neither Martha nor Vera filed any business activity forms in that period. Vera's fingers tightened around her pen. Which means, Brooks added, Ms. Vera's use of that branding in community presentations, sponsorship applications, and social media constitutes intellectual property infringement. A silence so dense filled the room you could have folded it. Martha broke first. You manipulated your father when he was weak. He didn't know what he was signing. I turned to her slowly. Is that how you justify everything, Martha? That people are always too weak or too stupid to challenge you? She opened her mouth again, but I reached into my bag and pulled out one more item. An envelope, torn slightly at the edge, my father's handwriting on the front. I passed it to the mediator, who read it silently before nodding and handing it over. The note was short, unmistakably his. To my daughter? Thank you for protecting the heart of what we built. I trust you'll do what's right no matter who stands in your way. Vera's carefully powdered face drained of color. She looked suddenly very small in her tailored jacket. I stood slowly, my chair not even creaking. Here are my terms, I said. You'll sign over full control of the business name, storefront, and all related marketing materials. You'll retract your claims both online and in writing. You will not contact me again, not for birthdays, funerals, or second chances. Martha's lawyer tried to interject. Mr. Brooks cut him off with one raised palm. If not, I added, we move forward with civil litigation, criminal fraud investigation, and a press release to every outlet in the Front Range area. The young lawyer paled. Vera reached for her water and spilled half of it across the table. I didn't flinch. 30 minutes later, they signed. I took the final copy in hand and without a smile added one last line in blue ink beneath my name. The gift you demanded was never yours to begin with. As I left the room, I didn't look back, because this wasn't revenge. This was release. 2 months later, I woke to sunlight filtering through sheer curtains in my modest Denver apartment. 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, but mine. No echoes of Martha's floral porcelain or old clocks, just me, a $50 0-cents thrifted coffee grinder, and dark roast brewing. I poured coffee into a simple ceramic mug with the memories. That morning, I spoke at a women's event in the library, sharing my story of betrayal and rebuilding without naming names. I spoke of family's slow erosion, the lie of obligation, and silence false peace. A woman whispered, It's my story too. Hands clasped mine, some asked for my lawyer's name. I gave my email. On my doorstep, a box held the polished soup bowl Martha once hurled at me. I placed it on my bookshelf. A relic. Not a word. That night at my $50 0-cents thrifted desk, I typed, Forgiveness isn't owed, violence isn't consent. Love is letting go before it destroys you, survivors commented, one saying, You helped me leave. Days later, in the grocery store's aisle 3, I saw Martha staring at peas, older, tired. Our eyes met, silent, truthful, heavy. I nodded. She turned away. Some wars end when you stop fighting. At my desk, I opened a doc. Chapter 1, The Day I Said No. The cursor blinked. I felt free. The story you wait to tell begins when you claim the pen.